way it's worded it gives examples. It says, for example, the turbidity must be less than 1 NTU. And for example, the UVT, if you think about that as kind of the colour in the water, has to be greater than 90%. Those two water quality parameters they represent very high quality water that you kind of get out of bore. So we would not meet them for Balmoral. So that's quite concerning for us. And I think in terms of how we've phrased the submission, it's really about, we will not be able to use this with these raw water quality limits. I think the regulator is quite motivated to get a solution that is proportionate to risk, because no one has uptaken these acceptable solutions, and I think they are under some pressure to get something that is fit for purpose. So I think by putting this submission through, I think we've still got a chance to influence this. So that's really where we were kind of trying to head with the submission, is that yet again you've come up with something that we're not going to use. Balmoral is exactly the target supply that this is supposed to be used for. So yeah, I just think we just need to be quite strong on those points. So yeah, that's really the main thrust of the submission. So these are the points that we just support. There's lots in it that's good, but it's that main thing around the raw water quality that's concerning for us.
Firstly, we're really fortunate to have, I think we've been sitting inside our working group, or being influential to consider the issues, and so yeah, I think we're really lucky to have you with the skills and expertise. But is there any questions? You've all read the submission, and I guess that's the questions that need to come to clarify in your mind the intent that has been written on our behalf. Ross?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Kirsty, regarding what you just talked about, have you given a suitable figure?
Yeah.
Is there something that, because we know the turbidity that will be in that, and for it to work for us, we want that to fall within the parameters. So can you give?
Yeah, so I've looked at our data. If for Balmoral, if we were looking at like average turbidity, it's 3.9. So that's over kind of like 5 years. So we could suggest, which I haven't done in the submission, but we could suggest that a turbidity limit's at 5 NTU.
Yeah, because otherwise it might be back and forward but if we were to give them
this would work for us.
That would work for us. And other schemes, I'm not sure whether HANMA has a score as well. It's average turbidity.
HAMNA's?
Yeah, I know it's treated to a different level.
Yeah. HAMNA would tend to come in less than 1 NTU.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, that would be my comment.
That's
if it was just a figure, that would work. Then.
So which question response do you think that would best?
Well, that's 9A. That's 9.
Madam Mayor, we did talk about whether or not we should put a figure in there, and it's debatable whether one should go in there or not, because the intention of my reading of it anyway, the intention of it is to say we want to make it usable by everybody. And the reason why I think the EG1 NTU is in there is because what they're trying to say is they don't want to make it onerous on the homeowner of having to continually maintain this system. So if the water is continually 10 NTU, they'll be forever changing out filters, and it'll cost them a fortune, and people will just steer away from it and not do it. So by putting a number in there, it kind of sets a stall out for us, whereas what we're trying to think about more is we need to make it so that it's not onerous on the homeowner.
Yeah, but this won't work at all with that.
Well, it's an example limit.
Yeah,
it's not.
Yeah, so it's not a fixed limit. It's you need to make it so that it's not onerous for the homeowner. E.g., 1 NTU.
Yeah, but sorry, through the chair, but if we're having to have a filter upstream, then we're double filtering. It's sort of, I mean, we've still got that cost of talking it down to,
Yeah, I think in this submission, I think it is quite strangely worded for a regulatory document that it has this EG. So, I mean, yeah, as Dan says, it's not a strict criteria, but I think the risk with them having the EG, having come from a regulatory background, is that it becomes the default compliance limit. I think that that's the risk of having an EG. I mean, the intention is quite clear in their clause that it does say they don't want basically the filter for the property to be having to be changed more than once every month, which I think is fair, because that's just too onerous for a householder to be giving them water that is that bad that they're going to have to change a filter out more than once a month. So I think the intention of the clause is good, but it's just this EG that I have a fear would become how compliance gets measured.
And I read in here that you're hoping that some of that turbidity will settle out before it gets to the homeowner anyway.
Yeah, well, that was another part of that submission comment, is the way it's worded at the moment is you've got to remember, like, this acceptable solution is for a range of supplies, and we always seem to think about it as, oh, it's Balmoral, but some of these supplies will not be restricted feed supplies. You know, in our instance, we are looking at it for a restricted feed supply. So their wording around where the monitoring has to take place is in the network before the point of entry device. And we would prefer that it gave a little bit more flexibility around that and allowed monitoring at representative after a property tank. And so you actually get a little bit more improvement in water quality from settlement within the tank as well.
So my next question is regarding UV, and my understanding is UV systems work properly, they should have a constant, I don't know, stop, start, too much flow.
Yeah, certainly older style UV units were like that because they don't like stopping and starting and heating up and cooling down. But yeah, newer units now, they're perfectly capable of like stopping and starting. Yeah.
Thank you, Ross, for those questions. Did you want to
No, I
add
think
anything?
Kirsty's covered the point that I wanted to make about sampling post the tank run, rather than sampling directly from the raw water source, which I think is a really important part of the submission.
So my last question is really, look, I'm all for point of entry treatment, but if it's at the tank, I'm just thinking quite often the tank is not near a power supply, it can be sitting up on the knob, removed from the flow.
Yeah, it doesn't have to be at the tank. As long as, yeah, it can be. I envisage it would be like in someone's garage.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, that's cool. Just so that it's not like wilted.
Yeah.
Thank you. That's great.
Can I just clarify where we're at with the unit limit for the submission?
Dan thinks leave it as it is. Look, I just want it to be submit now. Now's our chance to have a say on making it. Is it you guys that know the field better than I do? So
I think we're safer not specifying a limit. Personally, the way it was worded before, when we were in the workshop, and I was quite happy with, just said meet the manufacturer's specifications for the cartridge filter, which was, fairly loose and quite doable. But then the regulator decided that when they approached cartridge suppliers, they weren't actually prepared to put a turbidity limit on what their, so I think they decided that wasn't quite clear enough. So that they've come back obviously and decided to put those examples in.
yeah. So my concern is that, as you said, the EG, and they give an example, and if that's going to be what it's locked in at, well, hello, we're back to where we got anyway.
Yeah, so I think our submission kind of makes that point, is that we don't want those EG limits in there. It's just quite unclear how they would be interpreted.
Well, whilst NTU is all measured the same in NTU, not all particular matter will be the same. And it will phone up filters differently as well. So that's why we're saying if we put a number in there, it can become quite, well, it would bind us to something.
Sorry, through the chair, my last question, promise. My understanding is that, we're filtering it so that the UV works better, because otherwise you clog up the UV. So it's not necessary to take out any harmful organisms so much. I mean, we're hoping they're not in there, but the UV will kill them. But that's why we're filtering, is to
protect the UV.
Yeah.
Yeah, so essentially your UV unit doesn't work very well if there's particle matter. So it just, as it's passing through, the light hits the particle, deflects, and doesn't actually, it shields like any germs that are in. So yeah, it's the UV that is making the water safe. The cartridge is just making sure that the UV can work properly.
So that particular size of the filter size is a crucial one, because anything, I guess, under a certain size doesn't worry the UV so much. Or is it anything that gets through?
Not so much. Most UV units are validated to be able to cope with 5 NTU water.
Okay.
But yeah, as Dan was saying before, 5 NTU water can be water that is 5 NTU because it's got a few chunky particles in it, or water can be 5 NTU because it's got heaps of tiny particles in it. So I think they both have an influence on the effect of UV light and disinfection of germs. But yeah, the problem with particle size and turbidity is that you can put a 5 micron filter in front of your UV. If you've got really, really fine particles like clay, most of it just goes straight through the filter.
Thank you.
Great, good discussion, thank you. Thank you, Tom.
Yeah, just a very, very quick one. On the first paragraph of your summary, it stated that this will significantly reduce the cost of treatment for each household. Can you enumerate that? Will our water rates go down if it's substantial saving? Is that right?
So I think with the validated UV units, they were between about $6,000 to $8,000 per unit, whereas with these unvalidated units, you're kind of looking at like $1,500 to like $2,000 per unit. So in terms of impact on rates,
This is specific to Balmoral is what we're talking about. Balmoral are not in the harmonised water pricing that we have right across the district. So at the moment, they're paying somewhere between $150 and $200 a unit, whereas everybody else is paying somewhere up towards $1,500. So if we were to do a solution as per the current acceptable solutions, then their price would go up tenfold. So what we're trying to do is use these acceptable solutions to keep them down around that $200, $300, something that's acceptable to them. So yeah, so they're not part of the globalised water price.
Thank you, Tom. Robbie?
Yeah, so the problem is the cost of the units to do their thing, or if the level's set too low, we have to have a plant to get it up to a standard before it even gets there, and it goes to sheep troughs and everything else. And where does the who stops and start? Where's the stop start and who pays between the council and it coming out the kitchen tap? Like, to spend the money on a filtration plant, or do you have to pay for the filters as well at the house? Where's the line?
I mean, my view would be if we put a centralised plant in, if say if these limits, stayed in and we were like, well, we can't meet that for the householder, and we ended up having to put a centralised plant in, well, then I would imagine that everyone pays for that and you don't use point of entry treatment at all.
Yes.
You're just putting double cost requirements on them through rates for paying for the centralised plant and also the cost of having to put their own device on.
So not too dissimilar to what we've got on all the other schemes.
This, I think one of the things that we've got to think about here, and this will be a decision for council in the long term, if this was to go ahead and we get what we want, the acceptable solutions, then we've got some decisions to make around the actual treatment of that supply. So the acceptable solutions would just say, if you can get the water to the right quality, pump it out to the homeowner, it goes through their series of tanks, and then it goes into that point of entry device, and whether or not that's enough to provide safe drinking water, or we continue, as we do today, with our centralised chlorination. So we're protecting that water through the system, well, to some degree, and then we are still, so these are decisions that you'll have to make later down the line, but at the moment, we're just focused on these and how we do it. So depending on how that looks, everybody might pay for a portion of the centralised chlorination and then their share of whatever they have at their household. Or you might say, no, we're going to do away with chlorination, no centralised treatment, and so each household might just pay for what they've got. These are all things that we still need to work out yet.
Yeah. Cut-off point is essentially the water tank.
Yeah.
Everything beyond the water tank is on the homeowner.
So the home unit and the filters and everything else past that.
All of them.
Thank you.
Steve, can I just ask a question, just for my own clarity, really, on question 6? And it's really like we support, HDC support the requirement in relation to source water. And then we go on to say HDC would prefer to see a national register for acceptable devices maintained by the Water Services Authority to Mata Arawai. So what we're saying is that we would like them to offer a national database of acceptable or acceptable devices that people could purchase or wherever, rather than us having that available.
Yes.
Yeah, so it needs to be a nationally recognised for a system that's using the acceptable solution as an outcome.
Yes.
Yeah.
We just felt that in terms of administration of that, like there's some requirements on us to provide, as the water supplier, to provide advice to the individual property owners. So we just felt in terms of administering that, it's easier if there's a national register rather than us having to say, you know, this is an acceptable device or that's an acceptable device, and then, yeah.
So as a customer experience, we would just ask the customer to look at the database on the website and pick whichever one they want.
Yep.
Off that, yeah, national register. And as new technologies come on board, Te Mata Arawai should be the one that includes those new technologies.
Yes, and assess,
Managed.
you know, what comes up to their, you know, requirements, and has it on, yeah, they maintain that. That's not something that they've currently said that they will do. The way it's written at the moment is that we provide the advice on, you know, which devices could be used. So we just felt that's reasonably an onerous task to do that. They had at one of the workshops mentioned that it's something that they would kind of consider. So yeah, just kind of push the boat on that a little bit further, I suppose.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I was just checking to see, you know, at some point, are we do we want to have some controls over what devices or what systems are being supported or used, or do we want to relinquish that control, I guess, and we're supporting to let Te Mata Arawai be the provider of that information. Anyway, look, yeah, I mean, this is a work in progress, isn't it? We're submitting our best ideas to the authorities and they will cherry pick, I guess, and at the end of the day, the good suggestions that have been received by councils up and down the country. And so this is our best, putting our best foot forward, really.
Yeah, just final comment, because this could actually work for some private schemes as well. Just a comment on page 20 there, that people working on drinking water supply. Just clarity on that they must be competent. So
yeah.
So you know, I could say I'm confident because I've worked with water all my life and all box here and everywhere. Would that be suffice? Or
Yeah, I mean, it's up to someone to legally challenge exactly what is suitably trained and experienced, isn't it? But I mean, I think they've tried to be reasonably loose around that, which is good, because you do have to appreciate that when they're talking about the drinking water supply in this circumstance, the drinking water supply in terms of the Water Services Act is the whole supply and includes the endpoint treatment device. So it's not just talking about who can work on the centralised part of the scheme, it's actually talking about the endpoint treatment device as well. So we certainly don't want anything like too, you know, qualified plumber or
Yeah.
something like that in there,
Mm.
because then people can't work on their own, you know,
Yeah.
change their own UV lamps.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Perhaps just before we look at the recommendation, if there's no other questions, I just see on question 11, Kirsty. It's got HDC support for transferal, and I'm just wondering whether it's the wee spelling mistake.
Oh, yes, yes, yeah.
So we might not want to say we're transferal.
No.
That may not get us anywhere.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
yeah.
Well spotted.
Look, with that being the case, I think we've had some good questions, and we've been really well supported by Kirsty's response to those questions, particularly from you, Ross, and I just want to acknowledge your in-depth and understanding of you know, this process we're in. So with that, if there's no alteration to the submission as you've got written in front of you, is someone willing to endorse that the submission has been presented on behalf of HPC? So Ross, you're happy to support that? Happy to move that. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Tom. If there's no further discussion, all in agreement with that, please say aye. Aye. Thanks. That's motion carried. Thanks, Kirsty. Really appreciate you coming to speak with us today, and then providing us some that overview as well. Thank you. So we were intending to do the public excluded, but I suspect that we do have a guest coming at 10 now, I think. 10:45. So we will break for morning tea, and we'll welcome our guest, Warren Thompson, and then we've got a deputation from the Amberley Beach Residents Association, and at the conclusion of that deputation, we will go into our public excluded just before lunch.
Adjourn meeting.
Adjourn the meeting. Yeah. Okay. You happy with that?
Yes.
Thank you. We will adjourn for the moment. We'll see you in about 10 minutes, actually. Thank you. Welcome back from our adjournment. And today we have Paul and no,
John.
John?
and Mark.
John and Mark, sorry.
That's all right.
It's close.
I can be Paul if you want.
Yeah, that might make it a wee bit easier for me. No, not really. Thank you. So you've come on behalf of the Amberley Beach Residents Association, and a normal convention is we'd offer you 10 minutes, and then there'll be 5 minutes of questioning with inquiry from council.
Sure.
So you're not new beginners for this process, so we'll enable you to have that time and then see where it takes us. So sorry about that, Mark. Yep.
No, you're right. Firstly, thanks very much for allowing us time to speak to you today. Obviously, there's a couple of things. We firstly wanted to thank the council for all their support in the Bund renourishment program that we've had in place. And I think there's a perception out there that the Bund is actually fully complete, or the nourishment program is fully complete, but we've got some concerns with that. But also too, we've been struggling a little bit with communication with the council, and that was probably really the main reason we wanted to come today, is because obviously we're trying to get things done because of weather patterns and so forth. And I know that we've addressed the council 3 or 4 different occasions that we haven't actually had any response back. I know there's a number of issues that were raised in those letters, but we're just trying to work out how we can better communicate between us as a community. And obviously, I'm kind of the spokesperson at the moment, being the chair, but that was really why we wanted to have a chat today and bring up some of those items that we had discussed in those correspondence. The first one is really, and I'm sure you're all aware of it, the Golf Links Road issue we've got. John here wrote to HTC back in February and concerning the drainage cut, which is north of the culvert, we've asked for the cut to be backfilled with adjacent windrow extended to the trees, which is about 40 metres, and to block this is to block the flood path. This request for remediation has been, well, we've had no correspondence in regards to that, and it seems to have been ignored. Obviously, on the 1st of June, or 1st or 2nd of June, we had that sea storm that scoured and spread sand and shingle across the lagoon, extending into the delta. The sea ingress is on its way to isolating the culvert structure and opening the low land area behind it, and obviously affecting the road as well. We're just wondering if there is anything in place or is anything planned to help to address all that. We know it's not an easy fix, and we know it's a costly fix, but has there been something put in place with maybe even Derek Todd or something like that as a consultant to come up with some solutions for that area? The other areas I'll let John speak to. That's the first one we want to talk about.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks, John. Thank you, Mark.
I think we've sort of got an order of priority here. The next one is about financial items, and briefly, the council approved 750,000 for the build, and ABRAC cooperated with Redimix to fine-tune a budget believed to be 620,000, with 320 in the renourishment account and a $300,000 loan taken out. So recently, Amberley Beach renourishment expenses showed on SW Am Beach 2401 that 620 went to 650, then to 663,000 expenditures, which apparently increased our debt from 300 to 461,000. So there is no breakdown of detailed expenses or dates, including when the debt service started. So I think at ABRAC here, we would like to know what's the real financial breakdown and what is actually the debt now. We are actually obliged to serve, you know. So we'd like to know the breakdown of expenses for the 2025 bund because of the large increase in admin service. That's basically the question. Can we please have the details of the recorded balance on hand before we've started with the offsetting between our levy and the Amberley Beach Reserve funds? Is this request enough to get a response showing detailed income and expenses breakdown up until now, or do we have to make an official request?
Yeah, maybe if you'd go through the issues and then we'll see if we can find a pathway forward.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
the next step is actually central government funding. And ABRAC want an indication that a conversation with the Climate Change Minister for Finance Assistance is continuing and it's got some traction. Is there anything actually happening with approaching the Minister about that issue? The third issue is the Waipara River. And is council aware that ABRAC sent a submission to ECAN concerning their gravel management strategy review in May, stressing the need for unimpeded Waipara River flow during floods to the mouth, including opening the outfall to sea in line with the river flow to maximise natural beach renourishment. And this whole question of natural beach renourishment, we've been trying to deal with it through ECAN submissions and Stormwater Cup. We do ask council to action a working plan for the Waipara based on existing global consents to open rivers to lagoons during flood times. And I think the Waipara River is actually a crucial one for us on the beach. So that's basically the issue.
Yep, your suite of.
As a summary.
Yeah.
The next one is the bund management plan. Can ABRAC please receive an update on the progress of this? As part of this, there is a need to reinforce the bund battle with either rocks or Bluemont bags 120 metres south of the culvert, and especially with the first 50 metres after the June 2nd storm. Will this be done, please? I want to make a comment that as far as the work that Rigamix did, the execution of the work was faultless. They did a really good job, but I do, and right from the beginning, had questions about the type of material they used, that it's got a lot of soil in it, but they assured me it would do the job. Now, in retrospect, seeing what's happened down there, I'm not quite sure about that. I don't know whether I should be voicing it here. I have, and I want to make it up. I'm going to talk to Rigamix. They've actually got in touch with me about it to see about some kind of follow-up and going through it. So that's still coming. With the bund management plan, I've been in touch with Taj and I'd like to know whether that's actually progressing to implement a bund management plan for repairs and maintenance. I think this whole issue of repairs and maintenance of building bunds with what the documents is proposing, I think what Mark was saying. They want to take over about 450 metres of our road, our Bund Hall Road. And in a time like this, they should understand that that road is used for 2 months solid, 5 days a week. So they would only have access to that road for 2 days, that's on the weekend. But like heavy duty machinery and the oil ladies in their golf carts, they do not make it. Like the state of the road when those machines get onto it, they really make a mess of it. Yeah. It's a real mess when you go down there, especially when it's wet. You know, I went for a drive down there. They made this beautiful highway. I went down the rain and I had my car and I was horrified, like the amount of muck was all over the car after I'd finished. But that thing is capable of carrying 50 tonnes at 60 k. You know. They did a really amazing job just getting that stuff out there. So I want to make a point that they're actually going through a low point, right where that western arm of the southwestern arm actually goes through there. And I've actually got measurements. I've done a survey in there, And that whole area is point out to 1 metre below the 3 metre mark above mean sea level. And like, if they put a road in there, they're gonna have to really build that up just to stop it being, if the sea gets in behind, like it's started to now, it's gonna get right into that. See it coming, yeah. So I just want to make these points, you know, to council, that really they do need to be taken into consideration. And it's just through observation of what I see down there and see what's really happening. And I think this last week has been a great example. I think that whole section of road is out of control now as far as keeping it right. It's so obvious.
The weather event we had in the weekend wasn't a weather event, but we still had the road washed out.
Yeah.
With
It actually
the
came out of Southern
seas.
Ocean. Yeah, there was one of the Southern Ocean storms that are really destructive. Yeah. What's there anything else? There was something about North Canterbury News, and we're having a targeting what you said in the North Canterbury News. That the CEO says the bund was designed by Amberley Beach residents. In reality, it was a modification to the original design outlined the Amberley Beach for Ocean Maintenance Plan requested by Hironu District Council August 2007. The designer was Derek Tyler DTEC. All design modifications were discussed and reviewed by him before the 2025 work began. It was not my design, okay. I was just working in with Derek to, how to put it, refine it and take it forward. The article further says that Bund is owned by Amberley Beach Community, which isn't true, and ABRAC has no title of ownership on control over Bund expenditures that ownership would imply. And that's what I've got to say. So thanks, that's it.
Thank you. I just check in with your presentations complete. Thank you. Is there any questions to clarify, councillors, about what you've heard in regard to the presentation from John and Mark today? A number of issues being highlighted to us. Clarity required from councillors. Thank you.
Could I just ask a question? And I'm just aware that perhaps some councillors didn't get that email, but I did forward it actually this morning. In regards to, you've mentioned the area around the culvert and the suggestion for Bluemont bags, and that there's perhaps some discussion with Derek Todd Jacobs. Have you had any sort of insight or response from him in regards to that, and what that might mean in regards to the actual consent and cost?
Yeah, just a little bit. Derek and me actually, we had a wind up do down the beach, and we went for a walk up to the bund from there. And he was looking at it, and we both recognised that the next time the bund's built, it's going to have to be shifted back at least 5 or 8 metres. There'd be no question about that. If that bund is destroyed down there, without maintenance, and I think with maintenance, something could be done to preserve it. But the bottleneck and the holdup is the culvert. And so there's been discussion about it, that the culvert would have to be shifted inland about 5 to 8 metres at least. And what form that would be, either a Bailey Bridge or whatever. But this whole aspect of Bluemont bags came up, and we understand that as a Gore Bay that Bluemont bags are being used. Is that right? Whereabouts, and somewhere in the council they're being used
Potentially as Luxton.
potentially.
Potentially.
So it hasn't actually been
No.
action. Okay, yeah. So we're actually interested in the Bluemont bags because they are transportable, they're retrievable, and you can use them elsewhere if you need to. So with rocks, they're a fairly curly sort of thing to manage when you're using them. But with this whole business of Bluemont bags, I think it actually makes it a more pliable and flexible option for putting in some kind of sea protection there. So
It's the
way
problem.
things-
Sorry, I was just gonna say, because of where the culvert is, the whole bund design has had to be narrowed, and it's almost at the point. So it was really, really disappointing, but also expected when we had that storm, that would be the first area that would be affected. And so the rocks or the big that are embedded in the sand that help to protect it they're not enough. And I think that's probably our biggest concern, given that the bund has just been finished. And generally, the whole thing is working the way that it should. But this is a weak point, and it needs to probably really be addressed in terms of some form of maintenance moving forward. So the Blue Mont bags was an option that was considered or has been discussed.
It's been discussed.
Yeah.
Can I just ask, from a financial perspective, where do you see the cost would sit to, regardless of whether it's rocks or the Blue Mont bags or whatever? Is this about the debt that is now sitting with, and a part of that debt profile, or increasing that debt profile to complete those works, or in your mind's eye, do you see that it's an operational cost that comes in council? Because actually that might change how we think an outcome might actually be able to be progressed.
Yeah, well, I think, like just on the surface of reading that report that I mentioned, it seems like our debt's gone up from 300,000 to 460,000. And so it's like, where's it all going? Like a fencer doesn't cost that much. Even Dan Blair's time that he put it doesn't cost that much. Where has that extra money been spent? I want to know. And so, like, the understanding we had that maybe a bit of extra could be put into reinforcing around the culvert. But I don't think, if that level of debt funding we're doing now, I don't think it's going to be possible. It's going to have to be a council operation, And the council, we've always seen that the culvert is the council's problem. Because of the nature of the way it was set up in the beginning, it's always been a problem. It was not set in far enough up towards the moon. So,
yeah,
there's some discussion there about who seriously has ownership of the culvert.
And I guess too, I mean, your first issue that you highlighted was the Golf Links Road, and I mean, you'll be very aware that we're in a process of trying to actually determine, and that's been a lengthy process, not because there is several parties in that process that we are working with as well. So, but it does probably couple into what you're describing
That's
as
right.
the bund and the bund renourishment and the use of that Hall Road and all of those things. So there is a lot of things at play here.
Yeah, well,
So I totally understand that. Yeah.
Can I add a bit more? Like we think that we're actually being sidelined a bit about finance, because the golf course can come in here and ask and expect to get over $1 million, whatever, to put a new road in, and the council pays for it, this is what they're after. So, and then we're expected as a community to fund this bundle by ourselves. It's sort of like, and this has got an impact on the CAP too, Customer Action Plan, our bund thing. Now, if the bund's going to get smashed up before expected time, then the whole CAP thing's going to be put onto some sort of priority.
Sure. I mean, we certainly understand that, one thing leads on to the other under
That's
that
right.
coastal adaptation plan, that the durability of the bund, as we know, the investment that was made and how it was funded, and the ability for council to support the debt provision to enable that to happen, coming in about 750 grand or whatever it was. It is definitely all linked, so I guess what I've heard from you today, and I'm just checking to see if there's any other questions of council, but the things that I've heard heard from you, and I'll just double check it, was the Golf Links Road, the drainage being cut out, you know, because in the event of flood or sea inundation, that it will be backfilled and will be caught in that. So you're looking for some reassurance around that. You're also seeking some reassurance of the financial status, as you've read it on the on our financial breakdowns of where that cost sits. You're also questioning where the central government funding and further discussion with the minister is sitting at this point. And the Waipara River, the natural renourishment of the gravel management, page here, the Bund management renourishment, and that's wrapped up with golf links and blah blah. And perhaps some of the comms that went out around the Bund design and what you've read in the public forum in the media, and the Bund ownership, I guess, in respect to that. So that's what I've heard from you today, and I'm assuming that I've captured some of that discussion appropriately well. I wonder whether it's appropriate, councillors, if I have your support, that we instruct officers to understand these issues and respond appropriately to both you, Mark, and John.
Just even to ABRAC is absolutely fine, because obviously we meet every month with the residents, and so it would be really good for us to have some formal response on some of the items, even if they're work in progress, just so that we've got some reassurance for them.
Right. So perhaps, you know, do you think that's the best way forward, councillors? Just so that we get some, you know, we are instructing officers to answer those questions in the most appropriate manner. Some will be received with or welcome, received in a positive manner, and some answers, actually, the reality is, you know, we won't be able to furnish the responses that you're seeking. But if we try and identify those issues and respond, or ask officers to respond, I think that probably gives you some comfort that it's been heard.
Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, appreciate that. Yeah.
Happy with that, councillors? Do we need to move anything to that, or you'll just pick up on that? Pick up? Okay, that's fine. Is there anything as officers that you would, you know, like to add at this point, or we're waiting to get formal response?
No, I think formal response.
Yeah, okay, that's fine.
Appreciate it.
Happy with that?
Yeah.
Great. Look, thanks very much for coming along. I know, I mean, this is not easy when we're working with nature, and particularly the aggressive nature of the sea. We do have an appreciation of the issues that you're facing, but actually we are all facing those together. We've got many communities across our district. They may be coastal, they may be inland, but actually they've got the same pressure of the climate as we know it, and that might be seasonal dry, but it also might be, you know, the inundation of coastal forces. So we're doing our very best as elected members to try and facilitate opportunities, but you know, sometimes we're handed by process. So I'll just leave that with you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for your time.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks, councillors. Councillors, you do have one more item for today's discussion, and that is the matter that's in public excluded. I'm making an assumption that you have all read the information and do agree that it meets the test of public exclusion due to the privacy of natural persons. Someone happy to move? Thank you, Sharon. Yeah. Happy to second. Thank you, Dave, that we move into public excluded. And with that, I'll ask you to move